The Iowa Hawkeyes fall in their first game in the Big Ten tournament, 73-69 at the hands of the Ohio State Buckeyes, the 13 seed in the Big Ten tournament, the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm joined, as always, by Coach Gary Close, who is always good at giving us some therapy and some perspective, Gary. You know how hard it is to win during the month of March. But first of all, you made it back safely. You were at the game today. Tell us about your experience driving home.
Yeah, it was fun other than the outcome. Got down there in pretty good shape. Got to see the first game as well as the second game, the Iowa game. Great seats. And the ride back was a bit of a challenge. Weather was not great. So took probably an hour to an hour and a half longer coming back than it did going down, but made it. So it's all good.
Good to hear. So I don't know where we start. I've had a few hours to kind of think about where we should start. I'll say this. Let's just kind of summarize everything. Iowa has now lost 3 of their last 5 games, Gary. And, I mean, we can't escape that. And I was defending Fran, and people were, they had lost 2 straight games. They come back. They beat Indiana. They beat Michigan State in a kind of a heroic fashion at home. And now you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, they're kind of sliding here. If you look at the big picture over the past few weeks, what went wrong today besides the obvious? They made 4 threes.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. They made 4 threes, and I think Ohio State made 7 and shot a much higher percentage. And Ohio State's not that good a 3-point shooting team. So right there is 9 points in a 4-point loss. I thought they were a little loose with the basketball, very uncharacteristic. They didn't always result in turnovers, but I think they still had 10 or 11 turnovers, which is high for them, and some other plays that were there to complete and finish and score, and they couldn't complete the play. And when you get into a game that's close in March, that can be the difference. So Ohio State has been playing well of late. Their only loss was to Michigan State in a tight game at East Lansing. So they had been playing well and really have nothing to lose. And I think it's an advantage for the teams that play earlier in the beginning of the tournament. It doesn't as they go longer, because then fatigue is set in. But I think having played a game on the court was to their advantage, and they made a few more plays and, won a close game.
I've been accused plenty of times of being very defensive of Fran McCaffrey and not being critical enough. So here are my notes from today, Gary. Sloppy with the basketball. Perkins with 3 really bad turnovers earlier where he's just over dribbling. They didn't respond to double teams very well. It seemed like, that's I think you'd probably attest to the fact a lot of that's timing and understanding, recognizing when the double team's coming, when to kick. Chris had a very similar turnover where he's just kind of over dribbling. Didn't play defense in the second half. Open threes, especially from the corners. It seemed like Ohio State was getting behind the zone relatively easily. They don't seem to recognize that Sean McNeil is a really good 3-point shooter. Am I right on all those counts, Gary?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. In March, it really hurts because you're done. So, it's not like they played horribly, but they didn't play well enough to win. And that's against a desperate team. So they've got to play better if they want to go farther in the tournament for sure. So it's disappointing because I was looking forward to having maybe make a little run.
We'll get to big picture here in a second. We've got a bunch of callers waiting. Before we get to our first caller, which is on our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line, I want to take a moment to thank Iowa Smokehouse. They are still sponsoring the show despite the loss this evening. So thank you to Iowa Smokehouse. If you haven't checked out their great products yet, certainly do that. Go to iowasmokehouse.com if you need a better quality snack. And who doesn't need a better quality snack for game day? We got March Madness coming up. And regardless of what the men do, boy, the women are rolling right now. So get yourself some of their original beef jerky, their flavorful meat sticks, or perhaps some of their barbecue sauce. And you'll never need to look anywhere else for game day snacks. Visit iowasmokehouse.com. Tasting is believing with Iowa Smokehouse, and use that code Hawkeye. That's singular, Hawkeye, for 15% off your order. $50 orders get free shipping. And, of course, also want to thank Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm. We can talk about this later, but, boy, I recognize the importance of having good insurance. I think we've all had moments in life where having a good insurance agent and policy is helpful. Boy, Brad will take care of you, folks. Visit him at bradvanmeter.com or in person at 4229 Fleur Drive in Des Moines. You can call Brad at 515-256-6480. 515-256-6480. Brad's been a proud sponsor throughout the Iowa basketball season. All right, let's hope that we've had some people calm their nerves a bit over this worked out, Gary, because when you said you needed to wait until this evening, I think if we had went live right after the game, we would have had a lot of
probably
angry people. We may still get some angry people, so let's go. Let's go to our call-in line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Gary Close. Who's on the line?
I want to say how long your show has existed for, but I am loving it. There's a couple other Hawkeye podcasts I've listened to before, and I get sick of people just reading the box score and telling me what I already knew. I like that I don't get that from your podcast, so I wanted to say that first off.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Man, okay, so about the game today, I love Fran. I mean, I was not going to lie, I was a young kid when Fran came in. I remember writing a note to him for his Let's Be Mad Again campaign and getting a little button back. And so I love the guy, but I'm sick of getting beat by teams with good guards, man. When is that going to change?
Oh, that's a fair question. Although, I mean, Ohio State's guard core doesn't blow me away, Gary. Does it for you?
They're young. They've got talent. They're coming on. They took their lumps. The point guard has really started to play better and better. You can see he's a lot more confident and making plays that he wasn't making even a couple weeks ago. So, I thought their guards were better than our guards today for sure. It was a reason why they were successful.
I'll say this, Caleb. You're right about one thing. Aaron Eulis has to play better. Like, he's not giving you anything offensively. I mean, you look at the box score here, and I've praised him because I thought he got better as the year went on. He's turned the ball over less, had 0 turnovers today on a day where Iowa struggled to take care of the basketball. But 1 point for Eulis, 2 rebounds, 0 assists for your starting point guard. I mean, you can't have that, Gary.
Yeah,
he's got to give you more than that.
Well, and that for sure. But they didn't shoot well, especially from 3. So if some of those shots go in, then maybe Dust gets an assist. So
sure,
you got to have it at both ends because they did not shoot the ball well from 3, obviously, and did a decent job in 2. But a lot of times those 2s are one-on-one back ends where there isn't any assists. So I think it's a little bit skewed. But no, he's got to play better.
Caleb?
Yeah. I got another note here. So one thing that I've noticed kind of about Fran's teams, and now granted, I love sports. I watch every game Iowa plays, but I'm not a savant. But it seems like that Fran's teams know how to adjust in certain situations. Like they're going to realize at this point in the game, okay, they're playing zone. We're going to take open shots or try to crack the zone. Other times they're going to prioritize getting right into the paint. It just seems like, to me, I don't know if it's coaching or what, but they don't know how to flow with the game. At some points, we're prioritizing threes when we shouldn't be. At some points, we're pounding the paint when there's double teams. And they know how to do it, but it just seems like, to me, they don't know how to do it within the flow of the game, if that makes sense.
Gary, do you have some?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I thought for the most part, offensively, other than their 3-point shots, they got pretty good looks. I think the defense, especially the threes they gave up and the shooting percentage that Ohio State shot, was probably a bigger factor in addition to their very uncharacteristically handling the ball. But I do think there are times when their decision-making is a little questionable in terms of what you're talking about, in terms of either quick threes or not making good plays out of double teams, things like that they got to get better at. And when they're good at it, then they're a really, really tough offensive team to guard.
I will say this, this is not defending Fran, Caleb. I will say this. You look at the box score, Iowa struggled from three, but when they've struggled from three in the past, I mean, I'm thinking Northwestern, I'm thinking Wisconsin,
Yep.
They just kept jacking threes. They only shot 17 today.
Yeah.
Only shot 17 threes, was 4 of 17. I mean, 29 of 59, or excuse me, 26 of 56 overall. So, Gary, that doesn't tell me that they were just, I'm not saying that's what Caleb is saying.
No, right. No, I agree.
Threes.
Yeah, no, I think it was more the turnovers. I think it was more even plays that didn't result in turnovers, but plays that didn't finish, that they had advantages in transition, or, I remember the loose ball right there at the end of the game where they had a steal and pressure and didn't come up with a ball. And they seemed to get beat to a lot of loose balls today that took weird bounces and just some plays that they didn't finish that could have resulted in Tony Perkins missing 2 free throws. He rarely misses 2 free throws in a row. Things like that, they add up. And then when it's a close game, it gets you knocked out.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I add one more point before I go, you guys?
Sure.
I mostly, this is just for, like, out of respect for the guys of our program. I don't like the hate that people give to Connor McCaffrey. I'm just seeing a lot of it in the chat right now, and I also come from a family who's been kind of a Connor hater. He's one of my favorite Hawkeyes ever. This guy has given 6 years of his life to this program. He didn't have to. Realistically, he probably could have had a better career in baseball if he went that way. And I don't know, this sounds so cheesy, but in a way, like, I'm humbled by what he's given to the Iowa program. And I'm saddened at times that, like, one game, one bad 3-point shot by him, people are like, oh, here we go again, Connor sucks. I don't like that. That's all I had to say about that. Connor's awesome. He's probably one of my favorite basketball Hawks ever. I'm a young guy, but I just love what he's given to the program.
Yeah, I respect where you're coming from, and he struggled today. There's no way around it. I mean, he's another guy. Right. 30 minutes, 0 points, 0 of 2 from 3. He's not shooting the 3 ball well. So
no, he's even getting a little hesitant now. You can tell he's not. There's some open looks he's passing up. Yeah, he's in a tough little stretch here that is not at a great time, obviously. So, but he brings a lot to the table that keeps him on the floor. And this late in the year, you can't make a whole lot of changes. You got to go with what got you there, so to speak. And he has definitely been a big part of that.
Cool. That's all I got, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the call.
Absolutely. I understand the frustrations, and I enjoy watching Connor, but here's the thing, when he started making threes the first 2 months of the season, Gary, we both came on this show and said, boy, if he starts making threes at this rate, he is a terrific player. He has not been able to sustain that. And I don't know. I mean, obviously you sometimes return to the norm, right? Return to the average, return to the mean. Perhaps this is the mean. I think it was Kyle, who's actually waiting to talk with us in our queue. I think it was him who brought this up a couple of weeks ago. He felt like Connor has kind of regressed to the mean with regards to 3-point shooting. And I'll be honest, I think I've been kind of in denial of that and hoping that this has just been a slump for him and that he in reality has become the shooter that he showed himself to be in the first 2 months of the season. And I worry that that's just not the case. I don't know. You brought up his hesitation. Clearly his confidence is lacking right now.
I think so too. Yeah. Hopefully he can have a good week of practice and kind of get it going again, which could happen. I mean, I've seen it happen before, so it's not like he hasn't proven it before. So, but there's no doubt he's struggling a little bit now.
Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Jake, welcome to the show, Jake.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. First point I'd like to say is, as defending champs of Big Ten tournament, I thought the performance today was pathetic, given that they put themselves in this hole and they could have been playing tomorrow for the first game of the tournament. Getting a no-show from Connor, Ulis, and Sanford was hard. Sanford didn't attempt a three from what I remember, which is unacceptable in my opinion, given how good of a shooter he is. I got a question about, like, at the end of the game, probably like under the 4-minute mark, Ohio State kind of just dribbled the ball at the top of the key till the shot clock ran out, and then they just drove to the hole and drove right around our defenders. Connor was one of them. Tony Perkins was another. I think maybe even Patrick was another. Why are we guarding them like near half court instead of dropping back? Because they can just drive right around us and get an easy lane to the hole.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I wonder that myself, to be honest with you. If you're not as quick as the guy that you're guarding, then you won't have less floor to cover. And when you include, even though they did shoot threes well today, they're not a very good 3-point shooting team, and they're a very good driving one-on-one post-up team. I thought we got beat way too much with strong hands. Getting beat with lefties with a left hand and righties with a righty. And no, I agree. I thought the containing of the ball was suspect, and a lot of that's really comes down to a couple things. One is the guy on the ball. Obviously, he's got to contain it, but then he's got to have some help. We always talked about when people put their head down and drive, they better see more than one opposite jersey. The analogy, it's kind of funny. The analogy is if you're speeding and all of a sudden you see a policeman, what do? You jam on the brakes. And even if you're not speeding, you're jamming on the brakes. Well, if you go to drive and you see 5 black shirts, you're not going to be as willing to drive. If it's a big, huge lane, then, hey, I'm putting my head down, I'm going. And especially late, they gave way too much dribble penetration, especially with their strong hand. I mean, it's one thing to get beat with their weak hand, but to get beat with the right hand on a right-handed dribbler, right-hand shooter is dumb.
How about leaving your feet constantly? And Philip Rabracha, I love the kid. He can't not leave his feet.
There's a lot of teams like that. You watch games and everybody's leaving their feet. I
understand it's hard. I'm not trying to make it out like it's not hard in the moment when your natural reaction is to go up with the shooter. But boy, there was a play late in the game that
rarely helps you. Yep.
As soon as he left his feet, you knew what was going to happen.
Yep. No, exactly.
Jake?
Yeah, and Bardo made a comment when they kept driving to the hole that Holtman was just having his guys stand almost by the half-court line and knowing that we have better athletes than you, and we're just going to go right by you, which was disappointing to hear.
I'll say this, not to interrupt you, Jake, but he's absolutely right about that. Ohio State has underperformed, Gary. They got a lot of good, like, Sensabaugh is a dude, and even Bartle brought that. He made Connor McCaffrey look silly on a few of those drives, just bullying him in the post. And
that's the first time I've seen them live and up close. He's big. I mean, he has got a pro body. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, no, I think no, I think he's right. In fact, I felt all along the defense is too extended. But sometimes when you get nervous about giving up threes, you get too extended, and it almost is a double sword in terms of dribble penetration as well as kicking. So, yeah, Ohio State definitely hurt them off the dribble today.
Yeah, and another point I had that I felt like there were a couple key times during the game when we needed a bucket and Chris would just stand by the 3-point line and not demand the ball. And I felt like even sometimes last year, Keegan would do the same thing. I just wish that like he would come up to the guys and be like, give me the ball. I'm the best player on the floor. I'm first team all Big Ten player. I don't know if you guys see that either, but I just wish that he would just demand the ball more sometimes, especially down the stretch. It seems like sometimes he disappears in these late games.
I think that's fair.
I'd agree. And I don't think he's comfortable yet or real comfortable yet putting on the ball on the floor and posting up and finishing through contact and things like that, which takes time. It's not a simple thing to do, but I don't think it's something that he's really good at. He's okay, but he's got to improve in that area, especially when you need a bucket. I mean, you want to, the best way to come back in a game when you're behind is to get fouled and get the clock stopped so you can score with the clock stopped. And to do that, you got to have somebody that can take the ball to the hoop.
He doesn't have very many post moves, Gary.
No,
Chris is still very raw down there. And that's why I think he'd be well served to come back, but I don't think he's going to. And maybe he doesn't need to. Maybe he's just raw enough that the NBA, he's old enough and raw enough that they'll use him as a 3-and-D guy. He's not shooting the three well. I mean, right now, Gary, he's he had that game against Indiana, made some late threes against Michigan State, but here's another night, 17 points, but 2 of 8 from 3. He is struggling from outside. And he takes I've said this before, he takes a lot of contested threes. He and Peyton Sandfort take a lot of threes that are not open. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a slump, that can't possibly help you dig yourself out of the slump.
No, it's tougher for sure. Yeah, no. He had a couple that were right there that came out. He makes one more, then the percentage is not that bad. If he was 2 for 12, I'd be a little more concerned. But he's not stroking like he can. So hopefully he'll get that back.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jake?
I had one more thing.
Sure.
There were a couple times in the second half too that we were up at least 2 possessions and we got to stop, and Perkins just went full speed down the court. I remember one time he tried to throw a lob to Murray that got deflected. Another time he took a mid-range with like 25 seconds left on the shot clock.
Mm-hmm.
It's just disappointing to see, given that he's a junior. I could see that happening as a freshman, maybe a sophomore, but like right there, like that's another example. Get Murray a touch, move the ball, get a better look. I just don't see that type of play sustainable, and it was just so frustrating to see today in the game.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's what I mentioned before. There were a lot of plays out there that they just didn't finish, like the one lob. A little better execution, that's a basket. And there were other plays like that when you get into a tight game, they just kill you. I mentioned the steal and right there at the end of the game on the press, and that ball's right there, and try to dribble it rather than grabbing it, and all of a sudden the ball's loose and you don't get it, and you pick that ball up and score and the game's tied. Who knows what could happen? I mean, that's the fine line there, though. So finishing plays is important, and I don't think they finished enough plays today to win.
All right. Back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Gary Close, who's on the line.
Hi, this is Jeff from Idaho.
Hey, Jeff. By the way, real quick, before you start ripping me and ripping the Iowa defense, Jeff, I want to know where in Idaho are you? Do you mind saying?
I'm in Boise.
Okay. All right. I've
been to Boise.
Got friends in Napa, so Nampa. So.
Yeah. Gary, I'm a big fan of Fran, and I know you're a big fan of Fran. So you coached for Bo at Wisconsin from when to when?
I coached from 03 to 16.
Okay, so those were years just with tremendous success. And I admire that. And I've called in before and I've criticized, Iowa's defense and you've always come back to say, do you know how hard it is to win an NCAA basketball game? Do you know how hard it is to get to a Final Four? And I would like to say, yeah, I think it's really hard. But then I admire you and Bo because did you do it 3 times while you were there or 2?
Twice.
Okay. So you were there for 13 years?
Yeah.
And you did it twice. That's amazing. So here's what I would ask you is, I would say Fran's a top 50 coach in college basketball. And he does great stuff. So what would you say the big difference is between what you and Bo Ryan did at Wisconsin with what I would classify as similar talent as to what Fran has not been able to do at Iowa? And this is not to say get to a Final Four, but just have a more modicum of success, because you and Bo, you killed it.
Jeff,
and
you
we're
and
both high on Fran. So what do you think the disconnect is? What did you and Bo do that elevated that Badger team with maybe similar talent that just Fran hasn't? If you were to come in as an assistant coach with Fran, what would you do?
Well, that's a good question. And actually, after the home game against Nebraska, driving home, I was thinking to myself, can you be a high scoring team like Iowa is? They're one of the best scoring teams in the country. Can you be a high scoring team in the country and be a good defensive team? And then I tried to think of other high scoring teams that were good defensive teams, and I had a hard time coming up with any, which led me to believe, I don't know. I mean, it's there's only a certain number of minutes in a day to practice, and so what are you going to emphasize? What do you part of it is what you feel comfortable teaching and coaching, and you can't be somebody that you're not, and so when you're a high scoring team like they are, and there's going to be more possessions, you're going to give up more points. But what it comes down to is, can you make their points more difficult and not give up so many easy baskets? And we referred to layups like they got late in the game today, and then wide open threes. Those 2 areas will really get you killed if you're consistently giving those up. And so I don't have the answer. I'm not sure you can, tell you the truth. And so there's some give and take there to where you got to.
What did you and Bo decide to do?
Well, defense was obviously the first thing that we hung our hat on. Basically, we felt that
that's a shot.
For the most part, night in and night out, we are not going to have as much talent as the teams we're going to play. The Michigans, the Michigan States. So we've got to make the game a little bit more even. Well, how do you do that? You make it tough for them to score, and you take care of the ball. Iowa does a great job of taking care of the ball, especially with as high as they score. And they didn't take care of it as well today as they normally did. But and then during our Final Four years, we had some talent. I mean, we had some pros on our team those years, and you need pros to advance deep in the NCAA tournament. You look at the NCAA tournament.
Iowa's had pros too, Gary.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, you need legit pros to go a long way in the tournament for the most part. Every once in a while you'll get a a team that gets on a roll and can pull it off. But
Okay.
you need talent.
What are the pros that stuck in the NBA from the Badger team? So Kaminsky washed out.
No, Kaminsky's still in the NBA. Sam Decker had a shot there, but is making a ton of money over in Europe right now. He's one of the top players in Europe. I mean, the NBA is the top dog, but there's only 30 teams and 50. I mean, there's 450 players in the NBA.
I think Jeff's point, Gary, is the talent level at Iowa is probably not any less than what the talent level at Wisconsin was during that stretch. Like
our team in Wisconsin in 15 and 16 would have blown the doors off of this league this year. We probably wouldn't have lost 3-4 games maybe.
Okay, but Iowa has had the National Player of the Year. They had the National Player of the Year 2 years in a row. Last year they had a lottery pick in Keegan Murray, and this year they got a first-round pick in Chris Murray. That's a pretty.
And they had Tyler Cook. Who's played in the NBA, and Aaron White and Jared Uthoff, who are both doing great in Europe.
Well, the reason I bring it up, I'm not ripping your guys, Gary, and I'm not saying your guys that team is elite, obviously. But what I'm saying, I'm kind of supporting Jeff's narrative here that Iowa has had plenty of talent over the last few years with Garza and the Murray twins. And he brought up, obviously, Cook.
Well, they may have had plenty of talent to get farther in the NCAA tournament. I might agree with that. And I think the coaching staff would say the same thing, that they're disappointed they haven't gotten farther. But to get to the Final Four, that's a whole different deal.
Well, we got to get to the Sweet. You got to get to the Sweet 16.
That's what I said. I get you. But it's
any more of your time.
Thanks.
Why were you and Bo able to do it, and Fran and his staff not able to do it? What do you think the big difference is? Luck? I'm sure you're not going to say it's luck.
No, I'm not going to say it's luck. I think from that's a tough question. I think for the most part, we were probably better defensively, and usually when you get knocked out of a tournament, it's usually on the defensive end. Every once in a while, you have a bad shooting night and it knocks you out, but usually you can't stop people. And
Jerry, I'm going to say one last thing.
Sure.
You and Bo out-coached people. You drilled it, you grinded it, and you did it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Well, I agree with that. And the bottom line is, I think he's right. I think the formula is you have to play defense, right? The numbers do state that, like, to be really, really good, you have to be good defensively. You may not have to be great defensively, but you can't be bad. And year after year after year after year, Fran teams are bad on defense. That's just the bottom line. The numbers say it every single year. Regardless of roster, they're bad every year on defense, Gary. Like, they were decent.
Well, some years more than others, but yeah.
Sure, but when you're down 90 or worse in Ken Palm's defensive efficiency rankings, and I trust those ratings to be somewhat indicative of offensive or defensive performance, you're bad. You are bad. If you can't manage to be top 50, don't expect to compete for a Sweet 16. That's my opinion, and I think the numbers would support that. Certainly, you're not going to compete for a Final Four. So, and they've had years where it looks like, okay, they're trending in the right direction. And I go back to the Woodbury-Gasell era. It's weird because you go back and look at the numbers from early Fran tenure. They were decent defensively. The numbers said they were decent. Do you remember those teams, Gary? You coached against those teams.
Yeah. And probably the two worst defensive teams we had in Wisconsin, they were always pretty solid. Probably the two worst teams we had in Wisconsin were probably the two teams that went to the Final Four.
But how bad when you say the worst teams? Where do you think
they were still good, but they weren't like we normally are. And I think part of the reason why is because we were a much better offensive team. And I'm going to keep thinking about it. I'm not sure you can be a real high scoring team and also be a really good defensive team. That sounds like a cop out, but they've got to they obviously got to get better at it. But I can't think of one. And I know in our case, our two worst teams statistically were our two best teams. And we scored quicker. We had guys that could break people down off the dribble. We were a great shooting team. So our possessions were a lot shorter and there were a lot more possessions, a lot more chance for defenses to break down. And we were solid, but we were not great like we usually were.
And Gary, I don't want to stay on this up. We got people calling wanting to talk to you, but I just want to in fact, why don't we just do this? I know everybody knows how to access the internet, but since we're talking about it, let me just share my screen here. I'm going to share the Ken Palm rankings, and we're going to show everybody what we're talking about here. So these are the current rankings, right? And you see this is adjusted offensive efficiency and adjusted defensive efficiency. Now you see your teams here, and these are the ranking numbers next to those numbers. So Houston ranks 4th in the country in offensive efficiency, 5th in defensive efficiency. You see UCLA 21-2, 20-4, 10-15, 45-1, 11-23, etc. Scroll down. You see no teams here at the top of Ken Palm rankings, and most of these rankings are somewhat similar to what we would see in the top 25, and certainly when we have Selection Sunday in the top seeds. Here's Baylor. Okay, they've got a pretty poor defense at 100, but they've got the second most efficient offense in the country. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Oh, what's this? Iowa, 166 in defensive efficiency. So there, I mean, that's the most cataclysmic drop of anybody inside the top 40. In fact, if we go down Nevada, Steve Alford's Wolfpack, I'm looking at a wrong ranking. I don't even see anybody past 140. Let's see how far we have to go. Down to 57. Missouri has the 194th ranked defense. But, I mean, that should indicate how drastic the drop is when you look at the analytics between Iowa's offense and Iowa's defense. And, yes, they're really good on one end, Gary, but I mean, I go back to what John Beilein did, and somebody brought it up in our chat here. Bob says, I didn't know this, but you probably do because I know you have connections to the Northwestern staff. I guess Chris Collins hired a guy named Chris Lowry this year, and he's kind of known as a defensive coach. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. But I also think I'm guessing their philosophy changed a little bit too, in terms of emphasis, and I think probably some what do you want to call it? Technical things changed in terms of how they were going to cover things and things like that. And so it wasn't just bringing in a coach. I think they got on the same page and made an emphasis to improve that. And Chris had a lot to do with that. I don't think there's any question. So some of the Ken Palm rankings are, they're good to look at, and they certainly give you some idea. I mean, it's hard to compare leagues. You're playing in the Big Ten. It's a little bit different than playing in, any other league, the Ivy League or something like that. I mean, it's still good to look at, but put a team with a different ranking in the Big Ten and let's see what the rankings are. Then you have a better idea of how accurate those things are.
But you and I both know if we looked at Big Ten conference only stats that Iowa would be at the bottom of the conference in defensive rankings,
and they would be at the top in offense, and that's the way it's been. And goes back to my original thought. I don't know if you can do both. So do you have a meeting of the minds where you suffer somewhere to make something better? I don't know. It's an interesting thing I thought of, because I don't really remember any teams like that unless they were just so talented that it didn't matter. I always thought North Carolina never played defense, but they were so talented that they could just outscore you, and they can make great defensive plays at times because of their athleticism and length and so on and so forth. But it's an interesting thought.
But it is fair to say that Michigan made a wholesale change that sent them deep into the tournament, and towards the end of John Beilein's career there, they were better because they did hire a defensive coach and maybe changed some philosophy where those numbers weren't so lopsided and the scale kind of evened out a bit.
I would agree with that. And Northwestern did the same thing. Yeah.
Northwestern did the same thing. So the question that I think Jeff is bringing up is fair. Why can't Fran do that? I mean,
that's a decision he's got to make. I don't know. I mean, as he looks for a new assistant, what are the important things that he wants in his hire? That's what he's going to focus his attention on. So,
He
he's
may
had
not hire-
assistants. What's that?
He may not hire another assistant at Iowa. I mean, with Kirk
Yeah, he
walking
might not.
away, I mean, maybe Sherm retires after this season, but he had opportunities. And I like Matt Gatens and I like Courtney Eldridge, but he had opportunities. He was going to do something like that. It would have been this past off season with 2 coaches walking away, and he chose not to do that. So, if Sherm walks away, maybe he does that. But I tend to believe that, knowing how Fran operates, my guess is that he's going to keep doing what he's doing. I could be wrong on that, and I think he would argue that making the tournament basically every year is good enough. We haven't seen what they do in the NCAA tournament yet. Like, if they win 2 games and they make the Sweet 16, I don't want to say none of this conversation matters, but it does kind of solve everything. I'm not saying I expect that, Gary, but we still have basketball to have been played here in the next week or so. So, Anyways, all right, let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Let's go to James, who's been on hold. James, welcome to the show. Okay, while James is trying to get his audio figured out, it looks like you're muted, James. Dom wants to know, does a first-round exit get Fran's seat warm? Not at all.
Oh my God, no. No, I don't think so.
Dom just wanted to double check. So let's try to go back to James. James, are you with us?
Yeah, sorry.
Where were they picked at the beginning of the year?
They were picked 7th in the conference. Am I right in saying that 7th?
Were they that high?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, maybe that's middle.
And they finished.
Can I hear me now?
Basically right there. They basically finished where they were projected. I mean, they finished 5th, but there were a bunch of teams tied with them. So, yeah. James, what you got?
Can y'all hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. I just didn't know I was muted on accident. But, obviously, we've been harping for a defensive assistant. But for me, I'm not even asking to be good. I'm asking to be decent. It seems like it's not even that. You know what I mean? Where, I'm not even asking to be great. I'm just asking for him to show some effort on the defensive side, and it doesn't seem like he's doing that, if that makes sense. Like, if he shows some effort and it's not working, then it's like, okay, at least he tried. You know what I mean? But it's not even like he's trying. It's like he's just trying to go out there and outscore people, and if we can't outscore him, well, then we're going to lose. That's what it seems like.
Well, that's been that way. Again, that's not to beat a dead horse, James.
But I get that, but I'm saying I just want to see.
That's been the case for the last 8 years.
I just want to see effort. But first off, to the people saying fire Fran, this and that. For me, it's like, I've seen Todd Lickliter as the coach. Todd Lickliter was not a great coach. We struggled that whole year. So, making the tournament obviously is something better, I think. You know what I mean? Having Fran definitely is an improvement. We could be stuck with Lickliter, so we can't really complain in that retrospect. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say. For me, it's obviously I want to be better. Obviously, I want to make Sweet 16s. I want to go farther, right? But we could be stuck with Todd Lickliter or somebody of that caliber, so we can't really complain about the situation.
Sounds like the same argument that Iowa football fans make when they defend Kirk Ferentz. No, I'm just saying, James, it's the same argument Iowa football fans make when they defend Kirk and they say, well, he shouldn't be keeping his son here, but Kirk's given us great years and he deserves to make decisions and it could always be worse. That's the same thing you're saying, James.
I get that, but if for football, it's if we have bad seasons because we get rid of him, that's different. We've seen the bad side of basketball. We don't know if Fran leaves if we're going to have the bad side of basketball. You get what I mean? We've already seen the bad side. That's my point.
Sure.
We've seen the low we can get to. That's my point. That's what I was trying. We haven't really seen the lows we can get to in football because we haven't really got there because Kirk at least has won 7 or more games. That's kind of what the point I was trying to make.
Sure.
But
they were 1-10 his first year here, but that was 24 years.
That was Lickliter people still. But what do you think will be ranked when it comes to Sunday? What seed do you think will be when it comes to Sunday?
Corey's the expert on that.
I think they're going to be an 8 or a 9. Unfortunately, I hope they can drop to a 10. I think a 10 is better than an 8 or a 9, but I think they're probably going to be an 8 or a 9. I don't know on it how they possibly could stay in the 7 line, even if they were on that before today. Today's loss, I think, had to have bumped them down. I mean, it depends on what teams do around them, but my guess, if it had put a gun in my head now, I'd say a 9. But I'm crossing my fingers and hoping they drop to a 10. For
sure. And the one thing I've said, and I know it's not his philosophy, and that's why he doesn't do this, right? But it's also Fran doesn't recruit a guy who is focused on defense. You know what I mean? He just recruits the scorers or the guys who fit the system, which I understand that. But he also does the same thing with coaching. And you talked about coaching earlier where it's like, who's he going to bring in? It's the same as football. He's going to bring in a guy who just gets along with the guys or just is Iowa. Like sometimes you need to go away from that. And I've been saying that the whole time. Like go away from that. Find somebody who can focus on the defense or find somebody who meshes but not like perfectly. He always tries to find that people that like everybody gets along with. Like everybody's good with that. Like obviously you want people to get along with them, but like if you can find somebody maybe from the outside that's a little bit focused on defense that can kind of get to know the people and mesh with them that way instead of like trying to find somebody with the connections right away. Maybe they could change something too, but he hasn't tried that. He just tries to go with the connections. And I understand that, but that might be what's hurting us as well.
But I think what Gary said earlier is probably more than valid because I've been calling for Fran to hire a defensive-minded coach. But you can hire a guy who coaches defense. But as you said, Gary, you only have so much time to practice certain things. So if you don't change your mindset and your philosophy and your approach, it doesn't matter if your coaches know how to coach defense if they're not given the opportunity to do so, right? That's fair to say.
Yeah, it's got to. Excuse me, it's got to be a priority. Yeah.
Right.
I agree with that for sure. And a lot of the bubble teams, unfortunately for the Big Ten, you want to see them go far and do well in the tournament. Obviously, unfortunately, some of the bubble teams lost, like Wisconsin and Michigan. So it's kind of taking a little bit of a beating today for them as well. But
Wisconsin's done, and Michigan's done, and Rutgers is probably. And I would say, I didn't after the Iowa loss. I didn't turn the game off. I don't even. I heard Illinois lost.
Illinois lost to Penn State. Yeah, and I don't watching.
They played Illinois.
Every lower seed has won today.
Maryland's up 2 on Minnesota right now, but it's early, so you don't know how that game's gonna turn out. But
watch Minnesota beat Maryland. Anyways, anything else, James?
No, I just want to say I appreciate the show, and obviously today's a little bit frustrating, but what I want to say is we just gotta keep our heads up because obviously it could be worse. And yes, if Fran goes, then we'll see. Maybe we might see the bright side of things, but we always just keep our heads up because we have seen darker sides, and at least we're not on darker sides, whether or not we make it to the Sweet 16 or not. Obviously it's the goal. We all want that, and if we can celebrate that. Because some we haven't seen in a while. But just always know we always have seen the darker side, so we could be on the dark side as well. So don't think of everything as like a negative. There is some positives of that stuff too. We just got to keep working, and hopefully we can get there eventually.
Very true, sir. I appreciate the call, man.
Thank you.
All right. Always appreciate James. He's here basically every show. So appreciate that.
Sure.
A couple of questions in our chat here, Gary.
Sure.
Hawk Love 23 says, Coach, any chance Fran could have used the box and one on McNeil? They don't have the foot speed to guard man-to-man. I don't believe it's foot speed, Gary. I think it's just fundamentals and defensive.
Yeah, I think, the problem with a box and one is if you've never really done it before and all of a sudden you're doing something that you're not very good at. It's one of the risks you run of being a team that plays a lot of different defenses. Maybe you catch a bad team that's not used to switching defenses, but then you're not as good at any of them because you're spending you're spending time on all of them. So I don't know. I thought it was more, we talked about containing the ball. I think they got a little too extended. Not only with the person on the ball, but the people off the ball. Just they're trying to cover too much ground. They've got to shrink the court and make it more of a 5-on-5 game in the half court when they're back in the defensive set. I think the defense is just a little bit too extended and the driving lanes are a little bit too big. And especially when you're playing a team that's quicker than you are.
All right. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Who's on the line? Okay, nobody there. Let's go to Kyle. Hey, Kyle.
How you doing?
Hey, Kyle.
I wanted to kind of 2 points. Wanted to go back to the first caller who talked a little bit about Connor, and I think that totally fair to not desire fans to hate so much. I totally get that, and I think that's a difficult part of being a fan of any major team is you're always going to have a segment of the crowd who probably doesn't know how to handle their emotions. I'm probably one of those guys at times, to be honest. But I think the one thing I'd like to say is that sometimes you got to give the devil his due, just in terms of sometimes it feels like when people do criticize Connor, there's this really quick defensive, like, but look at all the intangibles. Look at the assist to turnover ratio. Look at XYZ. And I get that. But I don't think that the way to handle somebody who is really, really hateful towards a player is to tell them that they're wrong. That doesn't work in human motivation very well. But to actually try to hear what they're saying, and I think you guys have never done this. This is why I just so respect your show. But the major media outlets, it really feels like they shove down our throats how awesome of a player he is, and they don't always provide a lot of nuance for like. I thought one thing that I noticed tonight that I had never noticed about Connor is how dependent his success is on the team around him, and that's kind of obvious. I don't know why I saw it, but we really struggled offensively tonight, and you could see that they were sagging off Connor, and like you pointed out, Gary, he was not ready to take his shot, and so he really is kind of dependent. If the other guys are scoring a little bit, his skill set is so crucial for this team. But tonight, when other guys weren't scoring, there just wasn't anybody for him to get the ball to, and so he just wasn't quite as valuable. And it admittedly kind of has a little less to do with him and more to how to do with the players around him.
I agree totally. I mean, he's a limited player. There's no doubt about that. But I would say two things. I think he does do things that help your team win.
Yes, 100%.
And then the second thing is that I don't think there's a whole lot of other options.
The one thing I'd like to say, go ahead.
When he's making threes, like he was making, he was making, go back and look at the numbers. He was making threes at a high rate in the first 2 months of the season. When he does that, paired with his ability to take care of the ball and operate and defend different, he's a really good Big Ten player. When he's not making threes, he does stand out like a sore thumb at times.
And he got beat off the dribble like 3-4 times today. We just struggled a little bit with the higher level quickness that we found, and that's not to point him out and say nobody else did anything wrong. I am skeptical that he could have hacked it in baseball, as the first caller said. I coach baseball and actually got to coach a couple kids that played at the University of Iowa, and he hit like 224 there, and then they didn't play him very much after that. And he had some injury problems, to be fair to him, but it's really hard to play at the D1 level in anything. And gosh, he was trying to do 2 sports. And so I think like we talked about last time, he kind of is who he is, and he brings so much good stuff, but we just need the other pieces around him to perform better for him to be at his highest level, admittedly.
There's no doubt. The team is, we've talked about it before, the margin of error of this team is not great. And there are a lot of Big Ten teams that are like that. And so they need everybody playing well. And when they do, they're pretty good. When they don't, they're not. And right now today was a good example. They just didn't have enough players playing at a high level to win a game that was very winnable.
A previous caller mentioned how we don't, I believe it was James, said we don't recruit defensive-minded guys, and I really do wholeheartedly agree with that. I will give one example, not to refute that, but just to say Joe Toussaint was that guy, and at media days at West Virginia, he commented how excited he was to play for West Virginia just because his skill set was more useful there, and it was. He worked really hard to be respectful of his comments, but you could see that there was some difficulty. And one criticism I will throw towards Fran is it appears to me he would rather play the higher floor, lower ceiling guy who's a safer play at key positions like point guard, rather than like a guy like Joe Toussaint, who admittedly I don't 100% know as a coach myself how Joe Toussaint gets better with like 3-on-2, 2-on-1 drills. Like, he really needs game experience to learn how to play a little bit slower and not out of control. And he had such a short leash that you could see how demotivated he was and how hard it was. He often played sort of scared and not free, and that's a huge motivational piece. And so I think we don't have those options this year. I just wish that we would have given guys like him a little bit longer leash to work through some of those problems, to play an extra 4 minutes a game. Because gosh, over the course of 30 games, that's an incredible amount of time that he doesn't get to develop. And then that guy transfers and we're kind of stuck in the position we are, if that makes sense.
Well, real quick, I just want to ask you this question, Kyle. So Aaron Eulis, I'm not debating what you're saying, but Aaron Eulis is not a defensive-minded guy. Is that what you're saying? I'm not saying he is. I'm just asking.
I would say in the right system, maybe he can be, but I don't think that there's any question that if you compare Joe Toussaint and Aaron Eulis, that one of those guys is a dog and likes to get up in people's grills. And Aaron just he's not that guy. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to punk him at all, but he doesn't strike me as that type of man. Joe just had that New York swag to him, and he was a tough dude. So yeah, Aaron could be that guy, but I think to Gary's point over and over, very rightfully so, you're going to coach to what you're comfortable with unless you go find help. And so I don't know that we're going to bring out of Aaron something that he could do if that's not a part of our DNA and how we coach.
The reason I asked that question is because I agree with you. I don't know that I look at him and think, oh, he's a defensive stopper. What's he giving you?
Yeah, almost nothing. That's the issue for sure.
He's not a defensive stopper, and he's putting out numbers. This is just one game, but his numbers. I mean, he's averaging for the season. He's averaging 6 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. He's your starting point guard. I don't know what is he giving you. I understand there's role players, but boy, don't you need more production than that from your point guard, Gary?
Yeah, how many minutes does he play?
For the season, he's averaging 23 minutes.
Yeah.
So low minutes for a starter, but
yeah.
He's
a starter. He's a starter because they got to put a starter out there. I wouldn't describe him as a starter. There are probably guys that come off the bench that are playing more minutes than he is.
Yeah. And traditionally, J-Bo held that position down for what was it, 5.5 years. And his production was not defend and beat guys off the dribble. His production was take care of the ball, get the ball out of his hands, and shoot it like crazy. So it's definitely a different role there. I do want to I don't want to take too much time, but I do want to ask you one thing, Corey, just to hear. You're very critical of the Fran fade, and I think rightfully so in some ways. From my vantage point, I hear you more so talking about the February fade as opposed to maybe an end of the season. Is that accurate?
I mean, I'm fully going to admit that this was a strong indicator of a fade if they lose on
for sure
Thursday or Friday. But if they go out there and win 2 games, then I don't have to consider. Yeah, they did lose. I mean, it is fair to say that they've lost 4 of their last. Am I right? 4 of their last 6 games. Am I correct in saying that now? So that's not good. But I don't know. I just feel like people, especially on social media, they like to move the needle. And they come out when it's convenient, and you don't. You didn't hear from them when they beat Michigan State. You didn't hear from them after they beat Indiana. And as soon as they lost to Nebraska, they're all out in droves. That's why because honestly, look at the data. I think it's probably been split down the middle when Iowa's actually been riding high heading into late season.
Can we do that quick? Because I wrote it down for you. You ready?
Go ahead. Aaron White's senior year, I think
they've had some serious runs. His first year, they finished the season 1-7, and then I always did the last 10 games to get a more even understanding, and then 3-7 in their last. Now that's the first year, but also you can't throw the bad out and not also consider taking a little weight with the good. So that's his first year. His second season, they finished 5-5. His third season, they finished 7-3, and that's when they had that NIT run, went 4-1 in the NIT. So that's check mark for a really nice finish.
5-5 is not a fade, right?
No, I don't know that that's necessarily a fade. I mean, it's not great, right? 5-5 is not great, to be fair, but his fourth year. Go ahead.
That was their season, Kyle. When they went 5-5, what was their total conference record? It was probably close. It was probably no better than 500.
I think they were. You're probably right, because that was his second year. Weren't they 14-18 or something like that?
Yeah. So that's my point. I mean, that's not a fade.
Absolutely. Totally fade. Totally fair. His fourth season, they went 1-6 in their last 7, and then 3-7 in the last 10. They lost in the first 4. Then the season after that, I believe this is his fifth season. It looks like 6th season. They went 7-3 and that 1-1 in the NCAA tournament. Next year, 1-5, 4-6 in the last 10. They go 1-1 in the NCAAs. Year after that, they do finish 4-1, but to be fair, they also went 6-4 in their last 10. Then they go 1-1 in their NCAA tournament. In 17/18, they go 3-7. In 18/19, they go 1-5, and then 4-6 in their last 10 and finish 1-1 in the NCAA tournament. In 1920, the COVID year, they finished 4-6, and that was a team everybody thought was just going to make a huge run. That one actually jumped out to me. I was a little surprised by that result. And then he's had some really nice runs these last 2 years. 2021, 8-2, 1-1 in the NCAA tournament. 21-22, 8-2, and then they go 4-0 in the Big Ten tournament, 1-done in the NCAA, and then this year they finished 5-5. So when I add all that up, he has 8 seasons where they were 500 or worse in their last 10 games, and 5 seasons where they were better than 500. But to give the devil his due in that, it wasn't like they had a bunch of 6-4. Those 5 seasons where they were better than 500, they were all 7-3 except for 1. And so there is a little bit of a tilt towards 500 or less to finish in the last 10. And maybe that's a better way to look at it, as kind of a 30,000-foot view, as opposed to what you're absolutely rightfully criticizing is, crickets when they do well against a good team down the stretch in a game of basketball that is just very variable game to game.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that data, Kyle. And again, if they lose next week in the first round, it absolutely qualifies as a fade. To lose, 5 of your last 7, that's not good.
No, it isn't. No, for sure.
2-5 to finish the season. So no, that's a fade. So I appreciate your insight, Kyle, and thank you as always for calling.
Thanks for all the time. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Good stuff. People have brought it this evening, Gary.
Yeah, he was ready to roll.
He was. All right, let's. We've hit our hour. So Gary, are you cool to hang out with us for a little while longer?
Yeah,
here?
sure.
Let's. We got a couple more people to get to here. Let's go to. We've got Doug first. Doug, thank you for calling our Iowa Smokehouse line.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good, Doug. How are you?
Man.
I'm good. Big Ten tournament gives me some bad memories. Do you remember a grade teamer that you had by the name of BJ Charonis?
Sure.
Yeah, I went through 3rd through 6th grade at Gilbert Elementary School. So BJ was a grade teamer. Corey, do you know what a grade teamer is?
Tell me.
Can Coach tell you?
Walk on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Came in and
We just know that term doesn't get used much
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. We had a lot of them because we playing up tempo and pressure defense. You needed a lot of bodies. So we would usually have 4 or 5.
Anyway, growing up, my dream was to play for you guys. I never thought I could be BJ Armstrong, but I thought I could be BJ Charonis. So my goal was to be a grade teamer for you sometime. And I remember March 6, 1998 very well. It was the first ever Big Ten tournament, and I live in Cyclone Country, and they always got to have the Big 8 and Big 12 tournaments. And 98 wasn't a good year for you guys and all of it. That team went 9-7, Corey, 20-10, and missed the NCAA. I think it was the first team with a winning record in the Big Ten to miss the NCAA. It was also the first year the NCAA, the Big Ten tournament was ever held. One of the reasons why it stands out, because I made an agreement at the middle school. I wasn't at Gilbert anymore, but I was at a different middle school that I could listen to the game if I was good or did some chores or whatever. And I listened to this game, and I don't know if you never knew this interview happened, but Bob, it kind of speaks to the football team and the lawsuits and all that stuff. Bob Bowlesby comes on at halftime of your game against Michigan. Robert Tractor Trailer was one of the players that played on that team. And for Corey, that's who the Mavs traded for Dirk, was Robert Tractor Trailer. Yeah. So during halftime of this game, Gary Dolphin interviews Bob Bowlesby, and he talks about how much pride he has of replacing. This is before he announced that he was not renewing your guys' contract. He talked about how much pride he was going to have replacing these coaches, the all-time winningest coach both in football and basketball, and that's what he did next year. And that was always bothered me because it was just like, because Tom Davis, all Tom Davis did in his last 5 years was win 20-plus games. Right now, that's all Connor has done in the last 5 years. I know we're at 19 right now, is win 20-plus games. And again, I really wish you guys would have stayed. I see, that scenario where I'm the little gray teamer hacking people like Rudy and getting somebody like Jeff Horn mad at me. But again, people got to be, it could be worse, but don't make the NCAA. That was the most disappointing Sunday I've ever had. It probably was for you too, Coach, I imagine, because that was a Hawkeye team. It was a loaded. That team was picked number 1, Corey. We had Dean Oliver come in. We had 2 great freshmen. It was just a great team, and we didn't make the tournament that year. And it's probably the best Iowa team that didn't make the tournament in my lifetime.
Yeah, there were those days of having 10 Big Ten teams make the tournament. That didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost cut in half. I remember that team. We never recovered. We lost the first game in the NIT because we were so
It's Georgia
and losing, not being selected. But losing, going 1 and done in the Big Ten tournament didn't help. Probably if there had not been a Big Ten tournament that year, we probably would have made it. It was at a time when the Big Ten didn't get the kind of teams that they got in, and the Big Ten was loaded. I mean, they had some really unbelievable teams that didn't make it, but it was different selection back then than there is now.
Yeah, like I said, it really was messed up because you guys were never fired. Corey, coach was never fired from Iowa. They just didn't renew the contract. Right. They just said, hey, and I never understood that because you couldn't recruit. We basically went a year. 99 was the best year ever of Iowa high school basketball. We had 3 guys drafted in that class in 2002. Like, it would be really nice to – I just didn't understand why we gave up so early on Tom Davis to make that switch. It wasn't greener on the other side. We went a level down. Everyone talked about how Steve Alford was going to take us to Final Fours. There's a lot of things. I have a lot of reasons why I don't have much respect for Steve Alford, who I guess is in the running for the Notre Dame job. I don't know. Everyone seems to be in the running for the Notre Dame job. But, the last thing I was going to bring up was shot blocking. And Chris Holtman was talking about that they could basically take them anytime they wanted to. If we had a shot blocker, would that have made any difference? Because I saw Fardos Amax back on the market, Corey. So I don't know if we don't have a shot blocker. So I just was like, would that make a difference? I mean, they were just spreading the 5 guys out and just telling the one guy drive to the lane.
I had fun when Fardas entered the portal because I saw it coming a mile away, right? When Texas Tech gets rid of their head coach, and I just expected that to happen. However, I will be surprised if Fran pursues him again.
Okay.
I would just be surprised, but I don't know. There's no any insight into that. They pursued him hard last year, and there has been some drama. I don't know that it's been his fault, but there has been some drama in Lubbock involving him and his injury situation and whatnot. But Gary, just your thoughts on recruiting a shot blocker out of the portal potentially?
Well, we've talked about it before. My philosophy's changed a little bit with terms of blocking shots. AC Earl was probably still is the greatest shot blocker in Iowa basketball. He was one of the best in the Big Ten, and he had a terrific knack of being able to do it without fouling. But I've seen so many great shot blockers that get in foul trouble all the time, and so it's a crapshoot. How many times do you see a guy come over and try to block a shot, and the shot's missed, and his guy gets the rebound and puts it in? It happens all the time. So I used to love shot blockers. There's nothing better than watch a guy go up there and swipe the thing and put it in the third deck. But through time, it's not as big a deal to me now as it once was. We would take advantage of shot blockers. The kid at Ohio State, he's got some bounce to him, but you just give him a little eye roll and he's going to go to the ceiling, and you can just lay him out to dry, and he'll make a great play and make a great block. But then he's going to give up 3 fouls and 4 offensive rebounds and really breaks your defense down. So guys that are good at it and have got a great knack like AC, then maybe you take advantage of them. But, boy, they're few and far between.
My last thing was when they did go to that zone, the corner was wide open. Who I don't know if you remember that, but, was that just them breaking on their rotation? It was just – I don't know. It just seemed like you said you shouldn't mix defenses too much. Fran does that a lot. it seemed like, did they practice that? Because it looked even worse than the man-to-man.
Well, it's, that's when you're playing a 2-3 zone, the ball goes to the wing. The guard will usually come over and push the other guy off to the corner. And if there's miscommunication there,
Yeah,
you're late getting out to the corner, or a guy can come underneath and you don't see it. And yeah, they both were wide open, and that was the end of the zone. They didn't play it after that. I mean, those two possessions led to 2 threes, and then you never saw it again. And that's why a lot of teams don't play zone, is they just do not want to give up wide open threes. And I get it. I get it.
Going back to your last, or somebody on the chat said junk defenses. You don't see junk defenses anymore. Why is that?
I think it's a lot of thing with trends in basketball that, at a time that was a big deal. Jim Valvano would do it and other coaches would do it. And I think the offenses are too good now to let those kind of things affect. And the 3-point shot, the 3-point shot changes things up dramatically. You start playing a box 1 or a triangle and 2, and all of a sudden you're going to give up some wide open threes. Now, if they don't go in, then the defense looks great. But if they do, it doesn't. So, but I think it's more, I think coaches back then, it was kind of the rage to use defenses and do junk defenses and clinics. They were talking about it, and it's just kind of faded away a little bit. I think primarily because offenses are better in the 3-point shot.
Well, again, thank you for the podcast, Corey. Thank you to the callers, and special thank you to Coach for always answering my questions.
You bet. Good to have you on.
Appreciate it, sir. All right. Want to give attention to this question because it's related to what Doug was talking about. When Dr. Tom and your staff ultimately didn't have your guys' contracts renewed, did that come suddenly, and did you feel that you were on the hot seat prior?
No, it came sudden. It was after the season he talked about. And originally we weren't going to come back at all. And then they agreed to have us come back for 1 more year. I believe the college president didn't want him, wanted him to be able to complete his contract. And he had 1 more year left on it. And that the all-time winningest coach was going to complete his contract but not be renewed. So we had that last year, 98, 99.
Bob says, refs didn't beat us, but what did you think of the late game scramble? Chris was obviously fouled before he threw it out of bounds. I agree with that. Game was on the line. What did you think of officiating? I didn't think that was the reason they lost, but I agree with Bob.
Right. Yeah, I thought the officiating was very average. I thought they did miss some calls that I thought the foul on Peyton Sanford was weak.
It was terrible.
And that gave him 2, and he never recovered. That's what happens when you go to the bench and you sit. Some guys can recover, some guys can't. He was never a factor, and I think that had a lot to do with it.
He didn't touch him.
What's that?
Touch him.
Yeah, I know. I thought they missed a few there. That loose ball, it was a possibility. They should have gotten the loose ball right at the beginning. They tried to dribble it. You never dribble a loose ball. Never. You pick it up. Then you make a play. You don't try to dribble it, because if you dribble it, somebody's going to whack your arm or whack the ball, and it becomes a loose ball again. You go put your face on and grab it with 2 hands and possess it. And if you have to get on the floor to do it, you do it, but you don't dribble it. And we tried to dribble it, and the ball got loose, and then it just turned into a rugby scrum. And we, like a lot of those, we didn't come up with it. And it's, it's a big play. You get that ball and put it in, it's tied. Who knows? We might have won a game.
Ben says, how do we only play 8 guys? Technically 7. Dix only plays 5 to 6 minutes. Well, Dix came in, and I know he's cold, made a terrible turnover that ended up being a fast break bucket. I thought he responded with some solid defense on Sean McNeil. I thought he defended McNeil better than anyone else did. But again, we've talked about this, Gary. A lot of coaches shorten their rotations as the season wears on.
Yeah, and it's there's just not a whole lot there to, especially when you're getting into games where now it's one and done and you're done. It's a different game. Trust me. When you know that if you lose, it's over. It's a different game. So to put somebody out there that hasn't played a lot in a situation like that is probably a little risky.
And Jeffrey wants to know, why don't we see more Bowen? I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not there at practice.
I think it's the same thing. I think he just didn't quite get over the hump to where coach got a lot of confidence in him. And he's a freshman, so he's got to have a big summer and continue to develop. But it's just to do enough positive things in games and in practice to warrant the confidence.
Clint wants to know, are matchups in the tournament far more important than location or seed?
I think there is some truth to that. You can certainly get some teams that you would rather not play that can be a problem. So yeah, I think they're all a factor, but no doubt, I think sometimes some teams are you're better off not playing than others, I don't think location's a big deal unless you've really got to make a long trip, and the same thing with seeding. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Jeffrey wants to know, how someone explain to me why this team deserves an invite to the big dance. They are a tournament team according to their resume, Gary. There's no question they are in. They've got a bunch of quad one wins. They're going to be in the field, like I said, probably an 8 or a 9. I'd be surprised if they move off that line. I hope they do, but they are in the tournament. And Robert wants to know, it seemed like when they had an open shot, they passed over it and the defense caught up, made the shot much harder, no confidence. I mean, when you're not making shots, Gary, I
thought they passed them up, but that's what we had said earlier. It just it looked like the trigger was a little slow with some of the guys, and when you're struggling, that's understandable.
Chris says, sort of an odd question, but I noticed a theme of mediocre basketball and football. Where's the heart and passion to dominate, just flat out win as programs? Well, dominating is not easier said than done, Gary.
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
Dominate. Look at how many teams have been right nip and tuck the entire Big Ten season.
Well, Penn State with the win today is probably going to be in the tournament. They haven't been in since 2011. So it's been 15 years since or 14 years since 12 years since they played in it. Northwestern's got their most wins in the history of their program in the Big Ten. So it's tough to win, especially in March. So hopefully we'll have fresh legs, and we got a week to work on some things and be ready to play. And I do find when you get into the NCAA tournament, it's kind of a breath of fresh air because you're not playing teams you know so much, and they know so much about you, and they know every play, and they know every out of bounds play. And now it comes down to preparation and concentration, and sometimes, especially in a league like the Big Ten, you get away from playing Big Ten teams. You can play well, so hopefully that'll be the case with Iowa this week.
Chris, appreciate the super chat here from Chris. Corey and Coach Close, great tonight per usual. I must ask about the 2-foul policy yet again. Is the fear of getting 2 fouls indirectly hurting this team's their defensive intensity? That would be in the back of my mind as a player. Well, that's a fair point. I don't know.
Yeah, it is, but you've got to learn most fouls that put you into foul trouble are dumb. You leave your feet, you grab, you charge out of control. When you make a great defensive play and you get a foul, that's one thing. But when you leave your feet and foul somebody, or you reach and grab or hold, that's where you get yourself into foul trouble. So no, I don't think so. In fact, I think one of the reasons why coaches have the 2-foul rule is to get guys smarter and not making dumb fouls, because if they do, they're going to sit. And nobody wants to sit. So I think that's the primary reason why coaches do that, in addition to, not getting a third foul in the first half and potentially losing them, but also to send the message, hey, if you're going to be undisciplined and get yourself into foul trouble, you're going to be on the bench.
Appreciate that super chat from Chris. And Jesse wants to know what has happened with Connor. He's really struggling. Do you think he's worn down?
I think he could be. He plays a lot inside and gets banged a lot, and he's matched up with bigger guys, and that's where you got to admire the way he battles. I think there's some truth to that. So maybe there's a silver lining in there that they're not going to play 3 or 4 games. They get worn out. They got a chance to really get rested and get fresh, and fatigue's not going to be a problem when they play Thursday or Friday. That's for sure.
And Marcus wants to know, what seed do you guys want us to be? Like I said, I think 7-10 is the best scenario. Gary, if they're an 8 or a 9, they have beaten a bunch of quad 1 teams this year. It's going to be a tall order to beat a Kansas, a Houston, a Purdue. Well, they could play Purdue in the second round. I might not be too upset if they get matched up against Alabama in the second round, because they got some issues that we'll see how they play in the tourney. But do you have thoughts on where you'd prefer to be with seeding, given where I was at?
Yeah, I like the other caller said. I'm more concerned with the matchup and
Yeah.
who they're going up against and where they go, because they're going to have to play. They're going to have to play well to win, no matter what seed they are. So they're going to be a situation where they're going to be playing somebody that's a higher seed. So they're going to have to play well.
And Ryan says Iowa should have snacked on some Iowa Smokehouse at halftime. Speaking of Ryan, he's called our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Look at that.
Hello, gentlemen.
Ryan, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thank you, guys. Okay, Coach Close.
Thank you for calling us gentlemen.
Well, you guys are gentlemen. Coach Close, this god-awful place called Illinois notwithstanding, you were talking about speeding earlier. I'm pretty sure you're fine in Iowa or Wisconsin, especially along that 151 corridor through Dubuque. So pretty sure you don't have to worry about speeding as long as you stay a little north.
My buddy says, that I asked a friend of mine who's a policeman, I said, how fast can you go over the speed limit?
8 is great.
No, he said, yeah, maybe. No, 9 is fine. Above 9, you're mine.
I've heard that. I've heard 8 is great, and that one as well. Very true. Very true. That's why I try to drive 15 under, just to be,
kind of like so you follow Todd Licklider's example.
Well, speaking of Todd Licklider, interesting you say that, because that was actually going to be part of where I was going with some of this. He was National Coach of the Year at Butler the year before he was hired, and we were like, well, okay. We were all pretty tired of Golden Boy Alford, so we're like, okay. I remember making the comment to anybody that listened to me, we better get excited about Wisconsin ball. And, and if you remember, before Gary got on staff, Coach Close, excuse me, Dick Bennett in 2000 made the Final Four, typically winning like 66 to 56. And, what Wisconsin was not was a high octane offense. They weren't a phenomenal team athletically, but what they were was a well-oiled machine that played defense, fundamentally sound. They stuck to their principles, and most of all, they played fantastic half-court offense. And when Bo and Coach Close and I hate to say it, Coach Guard were on that staff, their offense definitely had an uptick, no question about it, but they still clearly were defense first. And I know Coach Close is very humble and all, and he admitted he went to 2 Final Fours, but that 2015 team made it to the national championship game against Kentucky. And if you look at the starting lineup, you had Josh Gosser and Bronson Koenig, a very, very disciplined backcourt who you knew who were in charge. However, not exactly on paper, the quote unquote sexiest backcourt that's ever played in the national championship game. You had Sam Decker, a fantastic player who, was drafted. Frank Kaminsky, who was not that highly regarded until Wisconsin developed him into the National Player of the Year. And then a real good, solid, but not spectacular Nigel Hayes. You went 7 deep, and you made it to the national championship game. Another team for Iowa that really stood out for me was 97. Now, that was when Josh Settles got hurt. You had an emerging Ryan Bowen, the unquestioned alpha on that team was Dre Woolridge, led the league in scoring and assists. You had a sharpshooter in Kent McCausland, not fast or anything, but a very good player, took 50% from the three, very good shots. You had Life as a G, Guy Rucker at center, double digit scorer. You had Daryl Moore off the bench, and you had J.R. Koch starting, a very solid player who also got drafted. And you lost to Kentucky, the eventual national champion, led by Ron Mercer, by only 6 points. Granted, Andre Woolridge darn near won the whole thing for us against the eventual national champion. What my point is in all that is, you're a coach. Those are two examples of, and I know you have more, where you got an awful lot out of what you had. And what I see today with Iowa, and Corey and I had a really maybe slightly animated conversation last time we spoke, because we talked about ceiling and we talked about something else. But ceiling was the big one. And I kind of implied that unless something changes, we've kind of hit our ceiling. Perfect example of what is hurting Iowa basketball. We're down 1, 17 seconds to go before halftime. And Perkins had the ball. He dribbles it down to about 6 seconds. Instead of just attacking the rim, maybe you get the shot in the layup, or at worst, you get fouled, get a couple free throws. He throws it to an off-balance Chris Murray, who chucks up another cockamamie 3 that I keep complaining about. And that is case in point what is wrong. We are not disciplined, especially in the half court. I contend that Wisconsin is better than Iowa year in and year out, simply because better half court offense and discipline, and of course they make defense a priority.
Ben says Ryan's preparation for this nightly call has to be close to the hours Corey puts in. Ryan, is that fair?
No, it's all up here.
It's all up here.
I mean, really, it's how I felt for years.
Yes,
I could go a long way, but we are a poor. We're 80 points a game because we're a very good transition game, and when our 3 is on, we're gonna win the game.
Hey, listen, let's just say, regardless of the defense ain't very good. We know that it's actually bad. We've said it before. I'll say it again. If they don't make threes, they ain't winning nothing, Ryan.
Exactly.
They're not winning nothing.
And what did I say a couple calls ago? When you're not making threes, you got to find other ways to get points on the board. If you don't get 70, you're done.
I believe 69. It was Dave Revson today. He said something. Dave Revson is excellent. I don't know how you feel about Dave Revson.
I agree. I like him. Yeah,
like Dave. Always have liked him. But he made a comment. It just seems like Iowa's either on or they're off. Bingo! That's been the whole year, Gary. Either they're on or they are off. There's nothing in between this team. They're either hot or they are cold, and that's what to me, I feel so. I feel like I've come to a realization today, Gary, and maybe I'm behind everybody else, but I'm comforted in knowing that they will win if they make threes, and they will lose if they don't. There isn't some magic formula with this team because they're not going to play great defense. They are what they are. I think they're average in the front court. That's not Philip Rebrach's fault, but they're undersized. You're not going to get Luka Garza level production from the post. You're not going to get great guard play. Aaron Ulis is what Aaron Ulis is. Connor McCaffrey is what Connor McCaffrey is. They have to make threes. And when they're not making threes, they're not winning games. And I don't remember a Fran team. I don't remember an Iowa team that has been so clear. Like that is the deciding stat. Night in and night out. It's, do you make threes or do you not? And other teams can survive when they don't make as many threes, Gary, because they play better defense, but we don't do that here. Anyways.
Yeah, I think that's good.
You're Ryan. I'm going to let you go because
we got to make
more threes. Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
How do you feel when it's pretty clear right now Aaron Ulis is just not going to give you anything? And, DeSante Bowen early in the year didn't seem too intimidating against Duke in Madison Square Garden. What's the downside? I hate to use that word with football, but what's the downside of putting them in? Ulis is right now giving us nothing. And one of the reasons other teams can win where we struggle, one of the big black holes we have is inconsistent guard play. Tony was pretty darn good today. He had 4 turnovers, but other than that, he at least was aggressive. But you need that other guard. Connor is generally not going to be the scoring guard. He's going to be the gravy guy, and he does all the little things. But you're going to need another scorer. And what's the hurt in putting DeSante in to see if he can give us a spark? It might have been the 4-point difference to maybe put it in overtime. Who knows?
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on Bowen? I mean, we talked
I
about.
think it's just too late. I think he hasn't played enough, and you got to go with, like we said, you got to go with what's got you where you are right now. And Ulis has had some moments. They have, it's not been every game, obviously, but I think it's rolling the dice a little bit too far to make a change like that. So, that play at the end of the half was a play I talked about where they just didn't execute to get a decent shot. I mean, he goes 2 for 8. He really went 2 for 7. He got the ball with 3 seconds left and had to chuck that one up. He didn't have any choice. But I thought there were like 4 or 5 plays like that normally they convert that they didn't, either being loose with the ball or making a wrong decision or not finishing, and it really cost them in a tight game.
Alexander says
their 3-point shooting.
You hope we get a 10 seed. Yes, I think that's pretty clear. I prefer that at least. And Gary, you said matchups.
Well, there are a lot of teams who would die for a 10 seed.
Yeah.
Wisconsin would love to have a 10 seed. Michigan would love to have a 10 seed. Those teams are not used to not playing in March Madness. And it looks like neither one of them will. You never know until the actual brackets come out. But there's always somebody that's got it worse than you do. So we're in, and let's see if we can make a run.
All right. Final note from Tony on our Iowa Smokehouse. Tony the Tiger. How you doing, sir?
Tony's got his championship hat on.
Yeah, he does. Celebrating.
I've got something else going on too. I am the Cal guy. Kyle commented in the chat, and Cal just fired their coach not too long ago.
They did. And they got guys transferring out.
That guy is a decent coach. I don't know what happened to him out there.
Yeah.
That's
well. It sounds like they just don't have facilities. They're just behind a lot.
Yeah. I want to start out with the. That's Berkeley, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to start out with the shout out to Ryan. I love the Life as a G Guy Rucker. That brings back memories. Oh man, that brings back memories. Did either of you watch pro wrestling like WWE, WWF, or anything like that?
Yeah, Gary does quite a bit.
Right, Gary? I don't miss it.
So you understand being the bad guy. I want to be the bad guy here. That's why I had the hat, and I want to sponsor my man Fran. He's still like, you look at the chat, and like, I'm sure I'll get roasted for wearing this shirt tonight, but he's still our coach, and I love the guy.
If they lose, I'm just curious, if they lose first round next Thursday,
I'm fine with it.
Okay. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Oh, no.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Speaking of defense, everyone's talked about a defensive assistant. I hear Coach Boeheim's looking for a job. Could he bring the 2-3 zone? Do you have any stories of him, Coach Close? Like, have you ran into Coach Boeheim?
We played them once. We played them more than once. We played them twice when I was at Wisconsin. We beat him at their place. We lost to him in the NCAA tournament. It is a tricky defense, but I would never play it.
Was he a good guy?
I really didn't know him real well personally.
Seems like a jerk to me, Tony.
Yes. No. That's why I was asking. Like, if Coach Close is.
Well, the last time I saw him, he had nothing but good things to say about Corey.
Oh, wonderful! He's the best guy in the world. I just remember when what did he call Andy Katz? He called Andy Katz an idiot. Do you remember that years ago, Tony?
Yeah, and he had the comment. I think it was Boeheim this year that the comment that Steve Forbes at Wake Forest bought his team through the NIL, and I'm like, you're telling me when you recruited Carmelo Anthony and all that stuff that I'm sure everything was on the up and up, but let's not get into Syracuse basketball. That was a great show, by the way, the bracketology show with Shelby. I think you might be able to say he miit be a better man than Coach Close. No, I can't.
Shot up.
Through the roof.
I think, speaking of the bracketology, I think we're solidly an 8 or 9 line. Like there's looking at some of I spend way too much time on college basketball, and I don't see any way we drop below 9. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Coach, do you subscribe to the theory that sometimes like teams do need to get out of the conference? Like I know you kind of touched on that a little bit. Like, do we just need to get out of the Big Ten and like the Big Ten style? Yeah. Iowa style is so contrasted, like you mentioned with the KenPom numbers, Corey, that we're such an offensive team that maybe we just need to get out of the conference.
Traditionally, the conference is very well scouted, and that's why it grinds to a halt at times. And no, I think it a lot of times is a breath of fresh air to go up against somebody totally different, and they don't know you as well as the other teams in the league do, and especially an offensive team. So hopefully that'll help.
And I've just got 2 quick things, and I'll let you guys go. I do want to say I'm very appreciative of Chris Holtman. I know you probably didn't get to hear this, Coach Close, but did you get to watch the post-game press conference, Corey, with him also in the media and on the court with, I think, Andy Katz interviewed him on the court.
He made some comment about how he hopes Iowa wins in the tournament. Is that what you're talking about?
He was very complimentary of Iowa.
It's always easy. Well, maybe, but it's always easier to say those things when you win, Tony.
Yeah,
but I mean, he just won.
Some guys don't. Some guys
don't. That's what I was going with. Is some guys don't like. For me, it's easy to hate Mike Woodson after what he did in the media. I mean, granted, we swept. They lost both games, but like, some coaches are a little more likable than others.
Sure. Oh yeah, Chris Collins, real likable guy, right? Mm-hmm. I think Chris Holtman, real likable guy. Tom Izzo, as I don't like Tom Izzo too much, but I think he's well respected by basically everybody in the conference. Don't you think, Gary?
Yeah.
So I'm not ever been a big Izzo fan, but John Beeline, great guy, right? Is that
real good guy?
So, anyways,
you know why you might be not a big Tom Izzo fan is I think Tom Izzo was the biggest proponents of Todd Licklider. He was very supportive of Todd Licklider.
Well, of course he was.
Yeah, exactly.
One more win on the
schedule. I do want to close.
By the way, but listen. Oh, go ahead. By the way, didn't Licklider's team beat him once, and Izzo went into the
38 to 36 or something like that? It was like Izzo, both teams are below 40.
Listen, I remember. Didn't Izzo say something in the post-game press conference about how it was like the low point of his career? Remember that?
I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it one bit.
Anyways, all right.
I do want to say, Corey, and I mean, I guess, Coach, like you've grown on me, even though you ruined my high school years. But I do want to say thank you,
Tony. You gotta let that go.
No, it's tough. I do want to say thank you for everything that you guys have done this year. I know the year's not over yet. Hopefully, you get a few more shows. I hope this show can continue until Corey stops getting ID'd. I just want to say with you.
I don't always get ID'd. First of all, I obviously don't buy cigarettes, but I when I do purchase a little beer or whatever, I don't always get ID'd. I usually get ID'd. If they're doing their job, I get ID'd. So
sometimes my jokes fall a little short of the mark.
Well, Gary's still hoping he can stop getting ID'd. Right,
I get ID'd every once in a while.
Yeah. Your wife? I got to make sure this is the guy I married.
Are you doing anything Selection Sunday or before our first game, Corey, or not?
I will be. Yeah, I'll be doing a live show on Sunday. Yeah.
Okay,
so I'll probably do one during. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm gonna be out of town throughout much of the weekend. But
Are you ever in town? It seems like you're always on the
yes, I'm always in town. In a town, Tony. I'm always in a town. But yeah, I'll be doing a live show Sunday. And then maybe Gary, I haven't talked to Gary about this, but last year we did a preview show of the first round game. We had Kenyon Murray on. I don't expect to have Kenyon Murray on again. Maybe we can do that again, Gary, once we know the matchup
Yeah.
and we have some time
Might
to
be
talk.
able to do that. Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah.
We can figure that out, Tony.
Okay.
So
I was just trying to give you a chance to plug maybe a future show or something like that.
Yep.
So.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. I appreciate everything, guys. Thank you.
All right. See you, Tony.
All right, folks. Appreciate Coach Close staying the extra 40 minutes today. Appreciate that, Gary. And I felt like this was a good venting session. And like I said, I would not be shocked to see Iowa, to see this year be the year they make the Sweet 16. If they start making threes at the right time, I think that the ones and the twos are weaker than in past seasons. So if there's any year to be an 8 or a 9, it's this year. Shelby Mast of USA Today and Tim Kruger of Stadium had him on the other day talking about the seed lines, and they said the same thing. This is probably the weaker of recent years, weaker at the top. So it might be the year to be a 7 through 10. So
there's no teams out there that you just say, oh God, I don't want to play those guys. Whereas in the past, there have definitely been some that have been like that.
So it'll be interesting to see the matchups. Like I said, I doubt the committee wants to get Iowa and Purdue in the second round. So if they're an 8 or a 9, they'll probably play either Alabama, Kansas, or Houston. So it will be intriguing. But obviously, they got to get through opponent number 1. If they play like they did today, they're probably not going to get through that first opponent. So.
Yep. Well, that's this is the wonderful time of the year, and crazy things can happen. So hopefully they can get on a roll. It's now's the time to do it for sure.
Want to give one final thank you to Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm. Call them at 515-256-6480 for a quote on whether it be renter's insurance, home insurance, life insurance, auto insurance. Give him and his team a call, and you're supporting the channel here from the Hawkeye of the Storm when you do so. And also, how about Iowa Smokehouse? If you need a good tasting, good quality snack, visit iowasmokehouse.com. They offer a full lineup. Tasting is believing, and use that code Hawkeye for 15% off your order. Use that code Hawkeye for 15% off your order, and $50 orders get free shipping. So we appreciate Iowa Smokehouse sponsoring our postseason coverage. And Coach, we'll talk to you hopefully before round 1, but we'll see where Iowa gets selected on Sunday, and perhaps better times ahead in a week from now.
Yeah, that's what we're planning on.
All right, folks, for Coach Gary Close, I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We'll talk to you soon.